Okay, now maybe I will start first explaining how I met Benjamin that is here, because we are in touch from several years, and he's also an activist, not only on drug policies, also on democracy, but I met him as an activist on drug policies, because when Marco Cappato some years ago started talking about the power of European Citizens Initiative and about the idea that at that time was just an idea, now we are trying to make it a reality, the idea of creating a movement of popular initiative based on preparing a package of proposals of citizens' initiative, well, I immediately thought about a citizens' initiative that was already presented several years ago by other activists, and it was a European Citizens' Initiative on cannabis. It was called We'd Like to Talk. It's also a joke. And it was born as an experiment, academic experiment in the university in France of Sciences Po. Some students presented this initiative just to see how further the competencies of the European Union could go. And the European Commission accepted in 2014 this initiative, and so we can say that there is a kind of competence of the European Commission on the issue of cannabis. Then I met Benjamin because one of the promoters of the pre-issue ECI put me in touch with him in France, in Paris, and we are in touch since 2 years, I think, trying to rebuild this initiative. We also changed a bit the previous text and the philosophy under the proposal. And I think that a European Citizens Initiative on cannabis is very important for two reasons. One, if it's an instrumental reason. So if we wanna demonstrate that the direct democracy is working, we can mobilize people on political issue, which seems to be very complicated in Europe because the ECI, it's a very weak tool, and we know we discussed it during this meeting. Maybe an issue on which there is a network of activists, very, very active, and that could collect signatures. Well, that could work. That could be the killing application for an ECI. On the other, apart from this instrumental reason that would be useful to have a true democratic initiative, on the other hand, there is a reason inherent to the value itself of the initiative, because nowadays a lot of countries are in favor of the cannabis legalization, and a lot of countries are reforming their policies on cannabis, legalizing or legally regulating in other way cannabis, and this doesn't seem to fully happen in Europe for a reason that we will try to explain. We know that a lot of countries on the other side of the Atlantic are legalizing. Uruguay did it for adult use in 2013. Canada did it last year. In the US, 11 states have legalized, and nowadays we see Luxembourg and New Zealand on the horizon. Anyway, I mentioned Luxembourg, but we should say that in Europe the situation is more complicated. It's not possible to have a full legalization because of a framework decision of the European Council. It's the framework decision that you can see mentioned here of 2004, which lays down minimum provision on the constituent elements of criminal act and penalties in the field of illicit drug trafficking. So this framework decision is saying that there must be a common standard of punishability as regard a set of substances between those there is cannabis. So the exclusion of cannabis from this framework decision will allow member states to end the persecution related to activities such as production, manufacturing, transit, distribution, cultivation, possession, and intentional personal use of cannabis. So this would be a very practical way to allow member state to fully legalize. Probably Luxembourg would be very helped by this kind of ECI, because it is an instrument that could allow them to propose a full legalization, which is the main difficulty that their current proposal is facing. And so, yeah, this is the philosophy basically under our proposal of ECI to change this framework decision. And I think that this could be very important, because nowadays I think that times people and the civil society is ready to legalize cannabis. A lot of progressive so-called parties are in favor of that. Polls show that in civil society a lot of citizens are ready for that, even though we don't see it we don't see a full legalization in any country in Europe because of the reason I mentioned of the framework decision. And so, yeah, to push for that from a bottom-up process from a popular initiative is the best way, because we know that governments won't take into account this issue, even if we consider it a popular issue, and they don't take into account because, as very often it happens, well, if an issue could be a problem for the electoral body, because maybe some electors could be against this issue, it's never convenient for a political party or government to take this decision. So the bottom up is I think the best process to push for cannabis legalization in this historical moment. That's why we decided to present this initiative that is still not submitted. We wrote a text and we wrote a policy paper that you can find on our website, Eumans website, and I'm showing you the text now. And this policy paper is co-signed also by Benjamin and his association Citoyens. So he also has a few words to say, to comment, I think.
Thank you so much for inviting me. As Lorenzo said, I co-created Citoyens about 4 years ago with the idea to really set up a process for participatory law proposal. So really a bottoms-up approach, solidified by experts and academic work. But the idea is really to bridge the gaps existing into different sectors of one society, and especially in between civil society and the political field and the administration, the media, and so on. We choose cannabis and more broadly drug policies because there is a growing divide, I think, into the citizens' appreciation of this issue, including especially cannabis, and the elected officials. And so what we did in one of the actions that we did, the biggest poll that France ever done on cannabis, and we did it with Terra Nova, which is a respected think tank, and we use one of the biggest law poll agency in France to have this stamp of appreciation, and it showed for the first time that we had a majority not only for medical cannabis. We were about 85% in favor, and now we're more than 91%, I think, to the latest. So this is kind of a win already, even in the most conservative part of society, where you see more than 70% of people voting on the right are for medical cannabis. But for the first time, you were seeing also that there are a biggest majority. I think we were for 53%. It's still in the margin, but it's quite interesting to see that for the first time, we were seeing a majority of people in favor of legalization of cannabis for social recreational uses. We started doing Citoyens in France at the same time that the Good Lobby started. I don't know if our friends from the Good Lobby are here, but it's quite similar to what you guys do, and I've talked with several people at the organization, and it's great to see the work being developed at the European level, but it's really how to bring ideas coming from civil society to spheres where it's usually not heard. And so this topic of cannabis legalization or legal regulation, as I prefer to say, is extremely important, I think, because we are seeing a growing divide in between the member states. We've talked about Luxembourg, but we could talk for hours about what's going on in Spain and in the Netherlands for the past years. France is a contradiction in itself, with the highest consumer rates in Europe, including among youth, and we're still having a difficulty to talk seriously about this topic publicly. So one of the things that we do when we go in the media, on the television, and people start smiling, we stop them if this is not a funny topic. This is not a subject for people who just want to smoke. This is a social justice, an economic, a sociology topic, which has vast ramification. And because it is a complex topic, it is sometimes difficult to integrate it into the public space. And so the initiative of launching a European initiative really interested me, because as much as it is a weak tool, as Lorenzo said, it has the power, I think, to help move forward that discussion on the European field, especially because it could give strength, I'd rather say courage, to elected officials who may think this behind closed doors, but not being able to defend it publicly, seeing that there is, just like with polls, a support from citizens that they usually don't realize is really a great way for them to bring them on board. What we're trying to do also with this initiative, compared to the previous one that happened in France with Would Like to Talk, is like we really would like to have it strengthened to the base with people working in the fields who's been working for decades on this issue, to legitimize this initiative and not make it a little bit outside of, not based on the ground, if I may say. I don't know how to say it in English, but sometimes it lacked a little bit of legitimacy from people working in the field. And I think that's our biggest challenge today, is to bring together different organizations. But just like sometimes communist sects, we agree on 99% of things, and we have a hard time agreeing on the left 1%, and so that's our challenge here, to really kind of overcome the little differences that we can have and move forward on this issue. I will finish by giving one example. What I think it is not just a process to have the right to smoke. Many of you may have heard about the so-called vape crisis in the US happening. This has nothing to do with vaping. This has nothing to do with e-liquid or CBD e-liquid. It has to do everything with having legal markets on one side and illegal markets on the other side in the recreational field. Those cartridges that were in cause were a facsimile of legal products sold legally in legal states, in Colorado and in California, but with a demand coming from outside of the states. Obviously, the illegal market responded to it, and we had on the market extremely dangerous products coming in. We will have this in Europe. This is a sure thing, and if we want to evade this, the best solution is to have a common ground on the EU spectrum. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Benjamin, for your overall framework of the European situation, also of policies on cannabis. I will give the floor now to Lorenza Romanese, which is Managing Director of the European Industrial Hemp Association. Thank you very much, Lorenza, for being with us and being interested in our initiative.
Yes, good morning to everybody. I've sent to you a PowerPoint presentation. If we don't have it, doesn't matter, I can do a short speech. Otherwise, not an issue. I can start. So my name is Lorenza Romanese, and I'm the Managing Director of the European Industrial Hemp Association. I'm not involved into the cannabis legalization because the plant I'm defending is the one without THC, which is the problematic substances. So I'm representing and defending the interest of hemp producers and hemp processing companies. We have nearly 300 members, and we cover 26 over 28 member states. I was not supposed to be here because I'm not supposed to have any issues due to the fact that I do not have THC. However, I do have, and I have many issues. So I have issues from one side because I do have THC residues in the hemp. So just to be on the same page with you, hemp is a plant which is called Cannabis sativa L, which is inscribed into the EU catalog, which is completely legal and can be planted in Europe. We have at the moment 69 varieties that can be grown in Europe, and all of them contain less than 0.2% of THC. By representing both farmers and processing company, EIHA, which is European Industrial Hemp Association, is involved in different EU policies, starting from the CAP reform, which is the Common Agricultural Policy, and then we have where we ask to increase the level of THC in the seeds and to be on the same page with Canada, US, and China, so to have the 0.3% instead of having the 0.2%. We tableted an amendment on the European Parliament, and the ComAgri voted it positively last April. So now we are waiting for the final vote of the plenary session that could happen in the first quarter of 2020. Why I want the 0.3%? Because everybody has the 0.3%, and because I keep breeding the same varieties since 20 years. So the plants are getting weaker and weaker, and therefore I need new genes to breed. And then because, as I mentioned, we have only 60 varieties today in Europe. If the European Council confirmed the tendency that we have in the Parliament, we might have up to 500 plants. So the varieties are quite much. These varieties interested us because they have long fibers and they have quality that interests the production of fibers and construction material. When it comes to THC in food, I have problem as well because EFSA tolerate a very low quantity of THC as contaminants in the food, for instance, in the pasta or in the flavoring or whatever. And Europe has the smallest limits, the lowest limits in the world. Everybody has 10 ppm, which is part per million, as a contaminants in the food. Europe has 5%. Who is deciding? It's EFSA. EFSA is the European Food Security Authority. After some calculation, they said that the EIHA proposal cannot be taken into account. We were asking to have 10 ppm like the rest of the world. EIHA rejected our proposal, so now we would like to get back to them because having a higher limit could avoid many troubles for my companies, because when the limits of THC rise a little bit, and it happens so often because they have small residues, it happens that in Europe you have the so-called RASF alert. When you have a RASF alert, all the product need to be withdrawn from the market, which a negative consequences. I have issues in causing, in cosmetics ingredients. Last April, the European Commission said only synthetic CBD can be added into cream. I want to add into cream as well natural hemp extract. We negotiate with the Commission, and we are very happy that 3 weeks ago now, the Commission gave us the leaves back. So now we can, add again naturally extracted hemp leaves and put them into cosmetics ingredients. So I can keep talking about how many problems I have. So imagine how hard things are for Benjamin because he has higher level of THC, and I'm figuring out many troubles with member states. It's not the Commission who is against. The most problematic actor now in the decision-making process are member states. So we are in negotiation with them, and we hope that we can find a way out, especially when it comes to food and the so-called novel food issue. I don't know how much time I have, or if you have any question. Or
Yeah, you can go on. Definitely.
So I have some issues with feed. There are no THC limits in feed today in Europe. There is only one member state who has their own guidelines, which is Germany. The guidelines have been adopted back in 1989, so they are quite updated, and all other member states refers to these guidelines. So today, what I would like is to have an harmonized approach at the European level. I'm working with member states to try to establish a fair limits of THC when it comes to feed. So feed is for animals, basically cattle, so big animals. And the problem that EFSA raised is that if cows consume hemp, which contains THC, the milk produced from the cow could have limits that could be harmful for the newborn. So I have a very small amount of contaminant of THC in the milk, which is 1 mg. So it's extremely low. And again, the rest of the world has different level of THC. One big problem, which in the slide I prepare is marked in another color, is the so-called Single Convention of 1961. So in 1961, the United Nations adopted the so-called Drug Act. They create a nice template where they put all the illegal substances in an order of harmfulness for the consumer. So, and the molecule THC has been put, no, we need to go back to the previous slide. This is different. Sorry, again, more. I'm still at the Single Convention. So the Single Convention basically is saying THC is on the same level of cocaine or LSD or whatever other drugs, and CBD is as well put into the same category. CBD is cannabidiol, which is the most abundant cannabinoid cannabinoid that we have in the hemp. So now the WHO proposed to move CBD to the schedule CBD from the list, but now the United Nations needs to vote. The vote has been postponed 2 times already because Russia, which other? Norway,
Singapore, Saudi Arabia, China. Yeah.
all the friendly one. So they said that they need more time to take the decision, and now the vote has been decided should happen, let's say, in March 2020. So probably at this moment, WHO said that CBD is not a drug. Now let's wait for the positioning of United Nations. If that's happened, that could help, of course, both of our cases for sure. We can go on. Yes, these are the policies that EIHA is following. These are horizontal policy. When it comes to environment, hemp could be a good ally when it comes to climate change. Hemp is the crops that capture the most CO2. 1 hectare of hemp can capture up to 15 tons of CO2. Hemp cleans the soil up to 4 meters. Hemp can restore the biodiversity. Hemp does not need pesticides. Hemp does not need fertilizer. But it's a drug. So that's the issue. EIHA is preparing some standards because, as you noticed, we have a booming of CBD players now on the market, and so we need to keep the trust that we have with our customer that consume CBD. So we believe that putting some standards on the hemp-derived product could be quite wise for the sector. And every time I have the possibility, I educate people or policymakers when it comes to hemp. This is a focus on hemp extract. So what's an extract? Extract comes from the Latin word extraeres, that means to draw out. When we have a coffee, we should not speak about coffee. We should say, I'm having a coffee extract. The same for the teas. Why we want hemp extract? We want hemp extract because we believe that hemp extract have health maintaining property. Hemp extract do not cure anything. Hemp extract can only help to maintain the so-called homeostasis. Why everybody is speaking about CBD? Because CBD is the most abundant cannabinoid, which is not psychotropic, not intoxicating, not addictive, and very well tolerated by human, even in large quantity. However, I have problem. This is something that I already told you. So in which way, no, next one please. In which way we extract today hemp for so-called traditional methods, cold pressing, ethanol, CO2, and fat extraction. With the technology we have today, we can even clean much more the hemp, the extract. Next, please. So everything was fine till the 20th of January 2019, when member states decided to change the so-called novel food catalog. Novel food catalog is not a legally binding document, however, member state looks at it. This change was quite catastrophic for the hemp sector because on that day, member states said leaves, flower, and extract are novel. What does it mean to be novel? It means a food that was not consumed up to a significant degree between 1997. So if a product gets the label as novel food, it means that he needs a pre-market authorization, which lasts 2 years and costs between 1 and 2 million euro. As you can easily understand, there is no SMEs today in Europe that can afford this price. So what we did, we collect some evidence that would demonstrate that hemp has been consumed before 1997. Actually, hemp has been part of our diet since century. First example, these are examples that we found. The Libro di Cucina, for instance, is the first cooking book, and we have hemp in it, and this is the recipe that we found, tortellini with canapaccia, which means tortellini with hemp. In Sweden, they have been drinking it, and in Germany as well. We have more or less 30 evidences that we submitted to member states. Next, please. The wonderful document that I'm showing you is that 20 years ago, the European Commission said to the hemp sector that hemp was not novel food. So based on this document, which is legally binding because was sent to the sector from the European Commission, we invested a lot of money. And now a sector that was completely legal 20 years later turned up to be completely illegal. So now the question is what I'm going to do with all the investment I've done. So we deserve that we need a clear and open dialogue with the European Union institution, and what I believe as well is that the public opinion can put a pressure on the institution and on the decision makers. And if you do believe, like me, that it's kind of shameless what is happening to the hemp sector, please speak about it around of you. This could be the best gift you can give to the hemp sector. Please, next. When we talked about hemp in the previous centuries, we should as well take into account which were the strengths that were planted. And as we can see, the strand that were planted 50 years ago contains even much more cannabinoid than the one we have today. So you can see 645% of CBD is enormous. We do not have any strain now that contain as much as CBD as we would like in any case, but we don't. Next one. When you talk about hemp extract, you need to understand the way in which hemp extract has been extracted for centuries. So I don't know if all of you are familiar with hemp flowers. Hemp flowers have a sticky resin around the flowers, and by the fact that hemp is planted outdoor, you have some atmosphere element that, like the wind, the animals, the bees, etc., that by contamination, the leaves get in touch with the seeds, and you have, by contamination, cannabinoid on the seeds. So 100 years ago, in the 20th century, they did not have the same technology we have them today, so they harvest in a very rude way, and the third picture show you the way in which they did extraction. So again, the method is quite rude, so we can assume that hemp has been consumed for centuries by human beings, even in higher quantity. On top of that, we have proof that demonstrate that hemp oil was the most consumed edible oil. So that means that human beings, again, have been consuming hemp, and there is nothing novel about hemp. Next. This is our position. Basically, we believe that leaves, flower, hemp extract are traditional food. On the contrary, we believe that the so-called isolated CBD is a white powder that you extract from the plant. And of course, we were not able to isolate before 1997. Therefore, we said to Commission that we believe that this is novel food. And genetic modified plants are novel food. Next one. So what we are doing, the line that is in the middle of the slide represents the naturally occurring level of cannabinoid. Any plant has a natural level, depends if we plant it in Sicily, has a higher quantity of cannabinoid if you plant it in Finland, but there is a naturally occurring level. So if the food business operator respect this level, it's food. If we increase the level, it's novel food. So for the low contents of cannabinoid, we will invoke Article 4 of the Novel Food Regulation. And on the contrary, we will do a novel food application through EFSA for the higher amount of CBD. Next one. Yes, the last one. The message that I would like to recall with you today, what we need from Europe and what you should ask around you is that Europe needs to establish a positive legislation on hemp. Second point, we need to take out and to stop all the prejudice and the inoccurrences around hemp. If Europe will plant industrial hemp, it will be a win-win situation for both, for the economy of member states and for the environment. Just yesterday, Italy adopted an amendment that allowed and clarified the legal situation when it comes to hemp dry flower. In Italy, we put excise. So this is a way in which Italy clearly understands that we can make out a lot of money out of this business. So let's put excise. And the sector, believe me, are willing to pay instead of being considered illegal. And if you pay something, it's by definition legal. The last thing we need, the sector needs the whole plant. For your information today, I can touch the fibers, the stalk. I can touch the leaves for cosmetics, but I have to throw away the flower. 1 hectare of hemp cultivated for fibers brings to the farmers 1,000 euro. 1 hectare of hemp cultivated with the flower gives to the farmers 4,000 euro per hectare. That's all. Thank you.
Before taking question, I just wanted to ask, to add that today and tomorrow and yesterday, the CND, which is the governing body on drug policy at the UN, is in session in Vienna, and it's an important focus to have, just as working at the national level, at the EU level, working at the CND level is as important. And I would add, for the final conclusion that Lorenza gave, that cannabis and hemp is also a way for member states to achieve sustainable development goals from the UN, for many reasons. I'd love to talk to you more about this, but it is an incredible opportunity for our continent to move forward with these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin, and thank you, Lorenza. I also have a question. Lorenza, you mentioned the huge economic damage that a simple decision from a public institution, in this case EU institution, can cause by turning an entire economic sector from legal to illegal. I was wondering if a legal regulation of cannabis that even go further, a simple positive legislation on hemp, is something that is somehow related to the economical interest of entrepreneurs and the economic world behind hemp.
Yes, surely, as I said before, last year they killed the sector, because the problem is that they did not kill the sector. It's even worse, because the change that was made on the 20th of January is not in a regulation or in a directive, is into a so-called novel food catalogue, which is not a legally binding document. So what happens? That Italy can decide to follow it or not, and France can decide on the contrary. So the problem is that we do not have any harmonization. What I believe is that let's start talking about the positive legislation when it comes to hemp. I would say that it could be much more wiser for Europe to stop dividing hemp and cannabis. It's the same botanical family. I mean, it's a botanical family, it's a plant. So even if mine do not contain THC, Benjamin one contains, it's always the same. So Europe should have a broader approach when it comes to cannabis. Do not be fair to speak about cannabis. We should stop this taboo. It's a plant, it's a cannabis botanical plant. So, and they should go into the cannabis, both do the recreational, not the adult use, probably starting from the medicinal one, but I'm not the specialized one. When it comes to hemp, I simply believe that you should consider hemp as food and allowed my companies to freely trade a product that have been there for 20 years because it was legal. So this is my opinion.
Do you have any other question?
I will just raise up and actually have a question. I have a question concerning the previous panel, but so if there are other, because just during this 10 minutes I had to go out. If the other have to do question concerning this panel, I will then talk later. I can talk? Okay. Later, okay.
Okay, so let's have the break. No, wait, I mean, 1 second, Lorenzo.
Actually, later it means if there was other one speaking, I prefer to talk now sincerely. I'm gonna be very short. Yeah, I prefer to be like this. The first actually is, I would like to ask some things to Hannah. I would like to ask Hannah when she was talking about initiative, that first, if she knows, if she had been in contact with the previous initiative, let me vote. Yeah, and the second is that about concerning the other experience in Europe. If she showed a few one, if for example she knows the situation about Belgium, where the liberal, for example, concerning Brussels, the liberal Flemish party, the Open VLD, is fighting in order to try to give the electoral vote to the local voters. I know that because it's the where actually live and I vote. And then there was just a reflection. It was about just a consideration. Is that in the Great Britain, in the United Kingdom, where there has been this kind of hate against the EU belonging and the influence of the EU, it's paradoxically the one that was more open in the term of vote, because the people belonging to the Commonwealth countries that were legally permanent resident in the UK could vote there. If I'm not wrong, it's the case for the Maltese and Cyprus and other non-European Commonwealth countries. While in Europe, these really don't happen. In France, it's not the case, for example, with the former colonies. So there was a kind of contradiction between one side, there was the kind of refusal of the EU citizenship, but then they have a kind of more universal and flexible conception of citizenship concerning the Commonwealth. From this point of view, in this contradiction, it was interesting, and I think that it's strange. And in a certain moment, you showed the participation of the people that were voting for the first time at the European election. So I was asking, how many foreign residents vote in each country in the European Union? Because from what I know, even if that after the Maastricht Treaty, there is this possibility to vote in another European country at the European election, but from what I know, at least from where I live, just 10% or less that vote of European residents, for example, in Brussels. So there were the kind of observation that I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for these interesting questions. Well, I think like you, considering the UK, that is very paradoxical. Like on the one hand, they have like this more advanced, maybe political culture in respect to the EU, and so on this side, maybe we could. I mean, there is a lot of campaigning now in the UK, so they would be a great ally if they wouldn't go out right now. But we want to try and launch like an off campaign in the UK at the same time, because we think that that they could be a great ally in mobilizing for political rights. And yes, I mean, as I said, the low turnout is a fact. I mean, people are not voting in the European election when living abroad. I mean, also in general, but and this is due mostly to the fact that lack of information, but also the non-automatic registration. So, for instance, I also went in Germany, and it was like nobody knew which kind of paper to give me. I had to go back like 3 times, and I was like, okay. So there are problems, and it depends from every country to country. So there is a need to harmonize, of course, and strengthen the existing rights in this sense. And what was the first question again?
It was about Let Me Vote. If
yes.
You were in contact with them.
Yes, the Let Me Vote campaign. I mean, as I said, I started recently. So, but of course, my the boss of my organization, of course, he has been in touch with him, and this campaign was launched in 2012. So, and it also didn't really try to build a stronger coalition. It was, but it was a very actually. They didn't reach the 1 million signatures, but the commission actually replied to this campaign, asking the member states to avoid disenfranchisement. So that was already a step forward, but only from the national perspective. So we want the Commission to extend the rights to vote to national, regional, and and referenda, because this would be a more European solution to a European problem. So.
Yes, let's have the break and consider that we also have another panel at from 1 to 2:30, and then we have 1 hour and a half of open discussion. So I'd say let's try to stick to the schedule as much as possible. Cool. See you here at 1 in any case. 1:05, va bene. I'm a fascist.